And that's the other thing. 7.3s, noise-wise, they're pretty freaking loud. I have a old body style 7.3. These were made from about 1994 until 97, 98, depending on who's counting what year. This is kind of a weird, goofy thing with Ford. They didn't technically make any 98-year models. They just made early 1999s. That one came out in 1998, but whatever, I won't get into that too much. But the old body style 7.3s had a single-shot injector. And essentially what happens is that injector fires and it dumps all of the fuel in at once. That's the way a lot of your old school IDIs were as well. The downside to that is a little higher emissions, but the main thing is it's super noisy. If most efficient means you can get the fuel into the cylinder, it's just super noisy. You ever heard a 7.3 fire up? They're not exactly quiet. Now I'm talking about old body style 7.3s in particular. They're super noisy. Super Duties were not so bad. They had a split shot injector. So that while the split shot injector, you could technically interchange an injector from a Super Duty and an OBS. They're same dimensions and all that. But the basic mentality is that the split shot injectors have a little spill port in them. What that does is that internally they have a little passageway that will direct some of that diesel to fire in before the main charge. So you get a little bit of diesel first, and then you fire in the main charge for your injection event. The reason that you do that is that for whatever reason it actually quiets it down. It helps everything kind of stabilize combustion and quiets it down a lot. And that's one of the things that you'll find a lot of modern diesels have. Now, instead of having split shot injectors like you see in the Super Duty 7.3, they actually have what's called pilot injection. And that's because modern diesels have much more sophisticated injectors. They can fire multiple times per your combustion event. Sometimes, nearly a dozen times in some situations, depending on how good your injector is. But the idea is that they fire a little bit of your fuel at once, and they can control how much fuel they inject. So if you were to actually look at your fuel that you've injected with respect to time, so you got fuel with respect to time, they have what's called a boot ramp injection, where it actually kind of looks like a boot. You give a little bit of charge first of fuel, and then you give it the main charge, the rest of that fuel. What that does is it helps with your nitrous oxide emissions, but it also quiets it down a lot. Your 7.3s, they don't have that. They're relatively simple. They have big honking injectors that are relatively slow reacting. They get the job done, but there's not a whole lot of tunability to it. So there you have it for injectors in the 7.3. Now the next area that I want to talk about is, I know a lot of people look at mechanical diesels and think that, oh, that's the end-all be-all because it's simple and it gets the job done. Well, the 7.3 Powerstroke has some electronic controls, but they're not all that bad. I've talked about this a little bit earlier, but it's not all that many components that go into it. So to give you an idea, there's only really a couple of sensors on a 7.3 that will ever go out. This is a platform of electronics that's been around for over 20 years now. And all things considered, they're relatively reliable. The main sensors that you have go out are your cam position sensor. You will have your injection control pressure sensor. Those are your two big, main, notorious ones. And depending on how much you care about having everything working properly, maybe your exhaust back pressure sensor. And you got your injection pressure regulator, but that really doesn't go out too much. But that's basically it in terms of sensors that really will affect the drivability of the truck and will affect it. So if you are ever having an issue with your 7.3, I'd be willing to bet you money it's either your injection control pressure sensor or your cam position sensor. That's basically it. You don't have any of these EGR valves like you have in the 6-liter, or you don't have vanes in your turbocharger that can stick up. It's simpler. They have less electronics on them, but they still have enough electronics that you can tune them and that they can actually burn their fuel pretty darn well efficiently. So there you have it with the electronics in the 7.3. So yeah, computers and components do go out, but you can still replace them, and all things considered, they're pretty reliable. But on the downside, comparing your Powerstroke versus one of your mechanical diesels such as the IDI, sensors do get expensive. your injection control pressure sensor, that thing, if you get it from Ford, is about $250. Luckily, it's not like something you have to do every year. It's just, that's just one of the sensors that usually fails. The rest of them are pretty much all going to be good for the lifetime of the truck. So that's that.
She's my 7.3, always there for me. Sitting right there in the middle, by me through the thick and thin. Always there for me. Oh, she's my 7.3. She's my 7.3.
Hey, wait.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I totally thought that was the cue.
No.
Okay.
Now, talking overall about some of the age of the 7.3. 7.3 Powerstrokes at this point are kind of getting to be a little bit older. My truck here that I have is a 1997 year model. It is 21 years old, and I've got 362,000 miles on it. You know, if you ever talk to anyone about the 7.3, anyone who's ever been around it, you get this response that's usually like, oh wow, you know, that's a great engine. It's one, it's a really good one. And that's the thing, 7.3 Powerstroke has a great reputation. A lot has to do with the fact that it's actually a medium-duty truck engine. It wasn't designed just to be used in these light-duty trucks like these Ford 1-tons, but it was actually designed for medium-duty application in your tow trucks. I'm talking vehicles that were designed to pull 40,000 pounds. That's because the 7.3 Powerstroke is actually the T444E engine that's manufactured by International Navistar, but essentially Ford rebranded it and stuck it in their trucks and called it the 7.3 Powerstroke. But essentially it's a medium-duty engine. And that's one of the nice things that makes it more robust. Now, that being said, the engine itself, it lasts a long time. It's a diesel engine. These things have I believe, a B50 rating of about 350,000 miles. B50 rating basically means that at about 350,000 miles, the manufacturer expects 50% of their engines will have had some serious work done to them that involves cylinder head removal. But that also means 50% of them they expect are to be running just fine. Past 350,000 miles, they'll have had no major work done to them, and they expect them to keep running just well. And that's one of the things that I found. My truck engine, it has some blow-by, and it probably didn't have the greatest compression in the world, but this thing starts, it runs great, it produces, with tuning, produces gobs of power. And so that's nice. But that doesn't necessarily say the same for the rest of the truck. That's one of the main downsides, is that these trucks are getting older, and they still are light-duty trucks. So let me go ahead and give you guys a little bit of reference. I picked up this truck a little over about a year and a half ago, and I paid about $4,500 for it. Texas truck, you know, it's a good Southern truck, no rust on it. And it had 343,000 miles on it. You know, 7.3 Powerstroke is a good engine. I'm sure it's good to go. And I didn't really think much of it at the time, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the rest of the truck is all that great. It's still a truck that has 360,000 miles on it at this point. It's going to be showing its wear. So all of my brakes were shot on this thing. You know, I've actually had to replace my fuel injectors on this. I've had to replace radiator on it, include thermostat. I redid the whole exhaust system on it. Tires are showing their age too. Interior falling apart in this thing. I've had to do a lot of work to keep it all together. And so there have you. I've spent a significant amount of money on this thing. So at this point, I think I've probably spent maybe about $11,000 in total in this truck combined. That's with some maintenance involved, oil changes, and you know, putting in this fancy gauge I have, or my TS6 Vision chip, new injectors, custom tuning, intercooled the truck, things like that are included as well. So bear that in mind. But if you really think about that, hopefully my truck should be good to go at this point. You know, it still leaks a little bit here and there, and you got to kind of accept that it's going to leak. 7.3's another reputation they have is as 7.3 leakers. That's because they really like to leak. You've got your oil coolers on these 7.3s. Those are notorious for leaking. If you own a 7.3, I pretty much guarantee at some point you'll have to replace an engine oil cooler. I have. It's messy, not a huge deal. It's like $60 worth of seals. It's fine. But there's that. Also, they have their fuel bowl assemblies. Those like to leak a lot. Once you get them resealed, they can usually do okay. That's why a lot of people actually delete the fuel bowls, is because they leak so much. Again, they're not exactly environmentally friendly trucks, I should say. Anyways, continuing on, another downside to the 7.3 is not the engine itself. Like I said, it's the rest of the truck, but also the transmission that is backed behind the engine. So to give you an idea, your modern diesels that you have these really nice honking transmissions that are tuned directly with the engine. They are optimized between the two so that they work pretty much in unison. These modern transmissions have 6 forward speeds, and that helps them get a lot of better fuel economy and be always making the most power they can get. Powerstrokes, the 7.3s, had weak transmissions. If you buy a 7.3, especially the automatics is where they get kind of weak, the automatic transmissions. They came with either an E40D or the 4R100. They are both 4-speed automatic transmissions that they get the job done, but once you start really pushing the power output on them, they're not going to do so great. One of the main reasons diesel engines are so hard on their transmissions, they say, is on that low-end torque, but really it's torque in general.
So let's say for reference that you have 2 engines. One's a gasoline engine, and the other one's a diesel. And let's say they both produce about 250 horsepower. Now, typically speaking, a gasoline engine spins about twice the RPM of a diesel. Now, in order for them to both transmit 250 horsepower, the diesel would naturally make twice the torque of the gasoline engine. You see, it's that torque that's exceptionally hard on all the components inside the transmission, and so diesel engines have to have transmissions that are at least twice as strong.
You can transmit more horsepower at a lower torque by increasing the RPM. But diesels, because they generally run a lower RPM, they're going to make a lot more torque. And that's what's so hard on the transmissions. So, at the end of the day, of course, you can upgrade the E40Ds and the 4R100s, and they can be darn reliable, but of course, they're definitely not any modern transmission. You're not going to get your 6 forward speeds. Now, the other cool thing, though, about 7.3s is that you can also get them with manual transmissions. They came with either a ZF5 or a ZF 6-speed transmission. And if you want to get a manual transmission in a modern diesel, well, you're just plain out of luck. So if you're really into handshakers and you like being able to control which gear you're in, well, there you have it. Might want to get a 7.3. Well, folks, that pretty much does it for this video here today. I hope that y'all enjoyed it, and I hope to help you out. And in the meantime, happy shopping. And if you have any questions or comments, just please feel free to leave that down below in the comment box. Take care.
She's my 7.3. And if you like this song, you really should subscribe.